The phone call came at 2 a.m. I was deep in sleep, curled up under my warm blankets, the hum of the ceiling fan creating a steady rhythm in the background. My dreams were peaceful, far removed from the harsh reality waiting for me on the other end of that call. The sharp ringing of my phone cut through the silence, jolting me awake. My fingers fumbled in the darkness as I reached for it, my heart pounding from the abrupt disruption. I barely glanced at the screen before answering, my voice groggy and laced with confusion. "Hello." At first there was only silence. Then a voice, calm but heavy. "Miss Carter, this is St. Jude's Hospital." In an instant, every ounce of fatigue vanished. My body went rigid, my pulse roaring in my ears. Hospitals don't call at 2 a.m. with good news. I sat up, my free hand gripping the blanket as if it could anchor me. What happened? There was a pause, one that stretched too long, suffocating me before the words even landed. "There's been an accident. Your brother, I'm so sorry." The room spun. It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. My brother Lucas, he was fine. I had just spoken to him the day before. He had been laughing, teasing me like always, telling me to visit more often. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Miss Carter," the voice on the other end was gentle now, softer. "We need you to come in." I don't even remember how I got dressed, how I grabbed my keys and stumbled out of my apartment. The world outside was eerily quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional passing headlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I barely registered the drive. I couldn't think, because thinking meant accepting. And I wasn't ready for that. By the time I reached the hospital, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I pushed through the double doors, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The smell of antiseptic hit me first, sharp and clinical, followed by the low murmur of voices, the beeping of distant machines. A nurse was waiting for me. Her eyes were kind, but they held something that made my stomach drop. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said. And just like that, it became real. Lucas was gone. A sob tore through my throat before I could stop it, my body folding in on itself. I wanted to scream, to fight against this cruel, senseless reality. But all I could do was clutch my chest, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The nurse gave me a moment, then said softly, "There's someone here who needs you." I blinked through my tears, my mind barely able to process what she meant. Then she stepped aside and I saw him, 6 years old, sitting in a cold plastic chair, his small hands wrapped around a stuffed lion so tightly that its fabric looked like it might tear. His little legs dangled off the seat, swinging absently. But it was his eyes that shattered me. Wide, haunted, searching for something, someone who wasn't there. My feet moved before I could think. "Caleb," I whispered. His head snapped up. The moment his eyes met mine, his lip trembled. "Auntie." His voice was so small, barely above a whisper. I knelt in front of him, my hands shaking as I reached for him. "I'm here, baby." For a second, he hesitated. Then with a soft, broken cry, he threw himself into my arms. I held him, his little body trembling against mine, and in that moment I didn't care that I was falling apart. I didn't care that my world had just crumbled around me, because he needed me, and I wasn't going to let him down. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how I was supposed to be strong enough for both of us. But I did know one thing. Caleb wasn't alone. I would make sure of it, no matter what it took. The days after Lucas's passing blurred together into a haze of grief, exhaustion, and overwhelming responsibility. The weight of everything fell squarely on my shoulders, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have anyone to share it with except for Caleb. The first night after the funeral, he wouldn't let go of my hand. He was small for his age, but in those moments, he felt even smaller. He clung to me like I was the last familiar thing in his world, and maybe I was. When we got back to my apartment, I expected him to cry, to ask for his dad, to break down the way I had in the hospital. But he didn't. Instead, he crawled onto the couch, curled into a ball with his stuffed lion, and stared blankly at the wall. I sat beside him, unsure of what to say, what to do. I wasn't a mother. I had never taken care of a child before, and now I was all he had left. I wrapped a blanket around us both and held him until he fell asleep. That night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what my life had just become. I had lost my brother. And I had gained a child. One I had no idea how to take care of. One who needed more than I knew how to give. The next morning reality crashed down harder. Caleb didn't have anywhere else to go. I had no choice but to take him in. Social services had already called to confirm it. I was his legal guardian now. It was my job to make sure he was okay, to provide for him, to give him stability. But how was I supposed to do that when I felt like I was barely holding myself together? I needed help. And the only person I could think to turn to was Jake. Jake had been my boyfriend for nearly 3 years. We had talked about a future together, about marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs. He had always been there for me in the past, had supported me through tough times. So I thought naively that he would be there for me now. I was wrong. When I told him what had happened, he looked shocked at first, as if he couldn't quite process the idea that overnight, I had become a parent. Then after a long silence he simply asked, "So what does this mean for us?" I blinked. "What?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I mean, I'm sorry, Emma. I am, but this is a lot. You're not just talking about babysitting for a few months. You're talking about raising a kid." I frowned, something cold settling in my chest. "He's my nephew, Jake. My brother's son. I'm not going to abandon him." "I'm not saying you should," he said quickly. We had plans, Em. We had our life mapped out. This changes everything." I stared at him, trying to understand how someone I had loved for years could be reacting like this. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He wasn't asking how Caleb was doing. He was only thinking about himself. My stomach twisted. "I don't know what you want me to say." He sighed, pacing the room. "I just think you need to consider what this means. For us. For our future." I crossed my arms. "You mean your future? Because mine is already decided." His jaw tightened. "Emma, raising a kid is a lot. It's exhausting, expensive, life-consuming. I don't know if I can be part of that." My throat felt tight. "Then don't." His eyes snapped to mine, and for a second I saw something flicker across his face. Hesitation, guilt, maybe even regret. But it wasn't enough. He had already made his choice. I don't think this is what I signed up for," he muttered. And there it was. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "No, Jake, it's not what you signed up for. It's not what I signed up for either. But life doesn't care about our plans." Silence stretched between us. Then finally he sighed, "I'm sorry." And just like that, he left. No fight. No Raol goodbye. Just another person walking away. I stood there, staring at the closed door, my heart pounding in my ears. But then, Auntie. Caleb's small voice pulled me back. I turned, my breath catching when I saw him standing in the hallway, rubbing his tired eyes. He had lost his father, and now all he had was me. So I swallowed the lump in my throat, forced the tears back, and walked over to him. I knelt, brushing a hand over his messy curls. "Hey buddy, you okay?" He nodded slowly. Then after a beat he asked, "Are you okay?" My chest ached. This little boy who had just lost everything was worried about me. I forced a smile, though my throat burned. "Yeah buddy, I am." And in that moment I made a silent promise. Jake had left, but Caleb? I would never leave him, no matter what, because that's what love is. Not walking away when things get hard, but staying, even when it breaks you, even when you don't know how you'll make it through. I had no idea what the future looked like now, but I knew one thing. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't giving up, not on Caleb, and not on myself. The reality of my decision hit me in waves. At first, it was just the little things, the changes in routine, the shift in priorities. I no longer woke up thinking about myself. The moment my eyes opened, my first thought was Caleb. Was he okay? Had he slept through the night? Did he need anything? But soon, those small adjustments turned into something bigger. Being a legal guardian wasn't just about feeding a child and making sure he brushed his teeth. It was paperwork, school meetings, doctor's appointments. It was making choices I had never prepared for. It was losing myself in the chaos of someone else's needs, and God, it was exhausting. The first few weeks I barely slept. Caleb had nightmares almost every night. He never talked about them, but I could hear him whimpering in his sleep, twisting in his blankets. The first time it happened, I rushed into his room, my heart hammering in my chest. He was curled in a tight ball, his small body trembling. His breathing was ragged, broken by quiet gasps. "Caleb," I whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart." His eyes shot open, wide and filled with panic. At first he looked around wildly, disoriented. Then when he saw me, something in his expression softened. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around my neck. "I miss Daddy." I held him, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. "I know, baby," I murmured. "I miss him too." He didn't let go. And I didn't pull away. That night, I stayed in his room until he fell asleep again. And I realized something. He wasn't just grieving, he was afraid. Afraid that, like his father, I would disappear too. And that broke me. So I made sure every single day that he knew I was there. I packed his lunch, dropped him off at school, helped him with his homework, read him bedtime stories, things I had never imagined doing before. But as much as I tried, I couldn't ignore the toll it was taking on me. Balancing work and parenting alone was impossible. I was constantly exhausted, constantly behind on everything. I barely had time to eat, to breathe, to exist outside of my responsibilities. My job. My boss was patient at first. He understood the situation. But patience has limits. "You've been late 3 times this week, Emma," he said one morning, his tone tight. "I need you to be more reliable." I wanted to scream. Reliable? I was doing everything, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I know. I'm sorry." "Caleb hasn't been sleeping well." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it. But this job requires consistency. We can't keep making exceptions." I nodded, biting back the frustration clawing at my throat. What was I supposed to do? Quit? Lose the only income keeping us afloat? I couldn't afford that. I was barely holding things together as it was. Then there were the comments, the people who thought they were being helpful but only made things worse. "You're so young to be raising a child alone. Are you sure you're up for this? You don't have kids of your own, so you don't really know what it's like." As if I wasn't living it every single day. And then there was the loneliness. Before, if I had a rough day, I would call Jake. We'd go out for dinner, unwind, laugh. Now my evenings were spent making sure a 6-year-old ate his vegetables and brushed his teeth. The silence in my apartment at night felt different now. I had never felt so alone, but I couldn't let Caleb see that. He needed stability. He needed me. So I kept going. One day, 1 hour, 1 moment at a time. Then one afternoon, Caleb brought home a drawing from school. He ran up to me, his eyes bright with excitement. "Look, Auntie. I made this." I smiled, taking the paper. "Oh wow, buddy. Let's see." And then I froze. It was a picture of us. A crayon sketch of Caleb holding my hand. And at the top, in shaky, uneven letters, he had written me and my mom. My heart clenched. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Caleb, sweetheart, this is beautiful." He grinned. "Do you like it?" I nodded, my vision blurring. "I love it." I didn't correct him because in that moment I realized maybe I was more than just his aunt now. Maybe in his eyes I was his mom. Maybe I was starting to feel like it too. The exhaustion never really went away, but it changed. It became part of my routine. Something I learned to carry rather than something that crushed me. The nights were still long, the mornings still chaotic, and the responsibilities still endless. But amidst all of it, something else changed. I stopped feeling like I was just getting through each day, and I started living them. Caleb and I built our own little world together, one that didn't revolve around loss, but around us. We had traditions now. Sunday mornings were for pancakes, always messy, always too many chocolate chips. Wednesday nights were movie nights, and Caleb always picked the same animated superhero film, even though he had memorized every line. And every night, no matter how tired I was, I tucked him in, kissed his forehead and whispered, "I love you, buddy." And every night he whispered it back. Somewhere along the way I realized something. I wasn't just raising my nephew. I was his person, his safe place, his constant, his home. I had worried in those first few months that I wouldn't be enough for him, that I would always feel like an imposter, a stand-in for the parent he should have had. But the first time he slipped his tiny hand into mine without thinking, when he called for me in the middle of a bad dream, when he told his teacher at school that his favorite person was his aunt, I knew I was enough. And I wasn't just surviving this. I was good at it. Of course, there were still moments when the grief hit unexpectedly. Like when I found an old birthday card from Lucas tucked in a drawer, his handwriting so familiar it sent a sharp pang through my chest, or when I caught Caleb staring at a picture of his dad one night. His little brows furrowed in quiet thought. I had knelt beside him, smoothing his hair back gently. "Thinking about your daddy?" I had asked softly. He had nodded, biting his lip. "Do you think he'd be proud of me?" My heart broke. I cupped his small face, forcing him to look at me. "Sweetheart, he would be so proud of you. Every single day." Caleb had smiled just a little and leaned into my arms. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much I still missed Lucas, I was meant to be here. For Caleb. For us. One evening, months later, we were at the park when a woman struck up a conversation with me. She had a boy Caleb's age, and as they played together, she smiled at me and said, "Your son is adorable." I hesitated. For a long time, I had always corrected people. "Oh, he's not my son, he's my nephew." But this time, I smiled back. "Thank you," I said. Because at the end of the day, blood didn't define family. Love did. And I had never loved anyone more. Life had finally settled into something good. Not perfect because nothing ever truly is, but real. Caleb was happy. His laughter filled our small home, his tiny feet running down the hallway each morning, waking me up before my alarm. I had learned to navigate the chaos of single parenthood. Balancing work, grocery shopping, school meetings, and the ever-growing list of things he needed for class. It was exhausting, but I had never felt so alive. And then just when I thought the past was firmly behind me, Jake showed up. I was standing in line at a coffee shop, waiting for my much-needed caffeine boost before picking Caleb up from school, when I heard his voice behind me. "Emma." I froze. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. That my mind was playing tricks on me, dragging up old ghosts I had long since buried. But when I turned, there he was, Jake, looking almost exactly the same but different in the way that only time can change someone. His hair was still neatly styled, his sharp jawline still familiar, but there was something in his eyes, something uncertain and hesitant. For a long moment, I just stared at him. Then I said flatly, "Jake." He let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. "Wow, it's really you." I frowned, gripping my bag a little tighter. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I wanted to see you." A bitter laugh bubbled up before I could stop it. "Now." His jaw tensed. "I know how it sounds." "Do you?" I tilted my head. "Because it sounds like you walked out on me when I needed you most, and then what?" Decided months later that maybe that was a mistake? He exhaled sharply. "I did make a mistake." I folded my arms. "Which part? Leaving me? Or coming back?" He flinched. "Emma." "No," I shook my head. "You don't get to do this." You laughed. "And now you suddenly want to talk?" He stepped closer, his expression softening. "I wasn't ready, Emma." I panicked. I scoffed. "Panic doesn't make you leave someone you claim to love." He sighed, shaking his head. "I know I messed up, but I haven't stopped thinking about you." I swallowed hard, something twisting inside me, because once upon a time, those words would have mattered, would have wrecked me. But now I felt nothing, because Jake wasn't my world anymore. Caleb was. And Jake had made it clear that he wasn't willing to be part of that world. I stared at him for a long moment, then said, "You're too late." His eyes flickered, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. "Emma, please, can we just talk?" I let out a slow breath, my heart steady. There's nothing to talk about. And for the first time since he left, I felt something I never thought I would. Relief. Because I wasn't the woman he had walked away from anymore. I was stronger. I was happier. And I wasn't looking back. Not for him. Not for anyone. I thought that would be the end of it. That after I shut Jake down at the coffee shop, he would walk away the same way he had before. But he didn't. Because men like Jake don't come back for love, they come back to see if they still matter. The next time I saw him, it wasn't by accident. It was outside Caleb's school. I had just parked my car, stepping out to pick him up, when I noticed someone leaning against a nearby lamppost. Jake. My stomach twisted. I tightened my grip on my purse, my pace steady as I approached him. What the hell are you doing here? His hands were shoved in his pockets, his posture casual. Too casual. Relax. I just wanted to see you. I glared. Near my nephew's school? He shrugged. You didn't give me a chance to talk. I folded my arms. That wasn't an accident, Jake. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Emma, I get that you're mad, but I'm just worried about you. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Worried about me? You're raising a kid alone, he said, his expression unreadable. That's a lot. I stiffened, something cold settling in my chest. There was the real reason he was here. He wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because he thought I had failed, because he had convinced himself that I wouldn't be able to do this without him. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. I don't need your concern, Jake. I'm just saying. No, I cut him off, my jaw tight. You left because you didn't want this. And now that I'm doing fine without you, that's when you suddenly care. He shifted, his lips pressing into a thin line, as he knew I was right. I'm happy, Jake, I said, my voice steady. Caleb is happy, and I don't need you checking in on me like I'm some charity case you abandoned. His expression flickered. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I tilted my head. Because it sure as hell feels like you came back expecting me to be miserable. Silence. And that's when I knew. Jake had wanted me to struggle. He had wanted to walk back into my life and see the proof that he had been right to leave. That I couldn't handle it. That I had needed him. But I didn't. I never had. I let out a slow breath, my gaze unwavering. You don't get to do this. You don't get to check in, feel better about yourself, and then walk away again. His jaw clenched. That's not. Yes, it is, I said firmly. And I'm not playing this game with you. I stepped back. Don't come here again. And then I walked away, because I had better things to do, like picking up my son. Ethan came into my life so quietly that I almost didn't notice. He wasn't someone who pushed, who demanded, who forced his presence. He was just there. At first it was nothing. A chance meeting at the bookstore while Caleb and I were looking for a new bedtime story. Good choice, kid. That one's my favorite, a deep, warm voice said behind us. I turned to find a man standing there, holding a cup of coffee and a book in his other hand. He had tousled dark hair, kind brown eyes, and the easy confidence of someone who had no trouble striking up a conversation. Caleb beamed, clutching the book closer to his chest. It has dinosaurs and superheroes. That's a winning combination, the man said with a grin. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was your age. Caleb's eyes widened, his lips forming a small O. What's a pale, Pauline? Paleontologist, the man supplied with a knowing smile. Someone who studies dinosaurs. Caleb gasped like he had just discovered a hidden superpower. That's so cool. I watched them, something unfamiliar settling in my chest. It had been a long time since I'd seen Caleb connect with an adult who wasn't a teacher or a doctor, and longer still since I had stood across from a man who didn't look at me with pity. The man finally turned his attention to me, offering a small, genuine smile. Hi, I'm Ethan. I hesitated for only a second before replying. Emma. Nice to meet you, Emma. His voice was steady, warm. We didn't talk much after that, just a polite goodbye, but the encounter stuck with me. And then, as if the universe had decided to test me, I saw him again the next week. And the next, first at the coffee shop near Caleb's school. Then at the park where I took him to burn off his endless energy. Each time we exchanged a few words, nothing deep, nothing heavy. And before I knew it, he had become a presence, a friend. Someone who listened when I talked about my never-ending exhaustion, who laughed when I told him about Caleb's latest obsession with space dinosaurs. Someone who never once asked me if I was sure I could handle this, never once made me feel like I was barely holding things together. He saw me. One night, when Caleb was asleep and the apartment was quiet, I found myself scrolling through old photos of Lucas. My chest tightened when I saw his face, his smile frozen in time. I hadn't expected it to hit me so hard, hadn't realized how much I still missed him. The grief came in waves, sharp and suffocating. I tried to shake it off, but my fingers hovered over my phone screen. Before I could stop myself, I typed a message, "Bad night." I stared at the words for a long moment before hitting send. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. What company? I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I should say no. I should handle this alone, the way I always had. But for some reason I didn't want to. Yeah. 20 minutes later, Ethan was at my door, holding 2 takeout bags and a quiet kind of understanding in his eyes. He didn't ask questions, didn't push me to talk. We sat on my couch, eating in comfortable silence until finally he spoke. You don't have to be strong all the time, you know. I swallowed hard, staring down at my food. I do though. No, he said softly. You choose to be. But you don't have to. I looked at him then, really looked. His expression was steady, unwavering. He wasn't saying it because he felt sorry for me. He wasn't saying it because he thought I was weak. He was saying it because he meant it. And for the first time in a long time I felt something crack open inside me. Maybe I didn't have to do this alone. Maybe for the first time I could let someone in. Ethan didn't push. He never asked for more than I was willing to give, never tried to force his way into my life the way Jake had. Guest stayed, quietly, patiently, and somehow without me realizing it, he became part of my world. It started small, a casual text checking in, a coffee waiting for me outside of work, a book recommendation for Caleb. Then one weekend he invited us both to the museum. Caleb, what do you think? Dinosaurs up close. Caleb's entire face lit up, bouncing on his feet before turning to me. Can we go, Auntie? Please, please, please. I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't trust Ethan. I did more than I had trusted anyone in a long time. But letting someone into Caleb's life wasn't something I took lightly. I had spent months making sure he felt stable, that he knew he wasn't going to lose me the way he had lost his dad. Letting someone in meant risking that. Ethan must have seen my hesitation because he didn't press. No pressure, he said with a small smile. Just think about it. That night, I found Caleb sketching dinosaurs at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in concentration. Are you excited about the museum? I asked carefully. He nodded enthusiastically. Ethan's cool. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. He looked up, shrugging like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Yeah. He listens. I froze. Because that was it, wasn't it? Ethan listened. To me. To the quiet things that no one else had ever noticed. So for the first time I said yes. And that yes changed everything. At the museum, Ethan was patient with Caleb's endless questions, crouching down to read the tiny information plaques when Caleb insisted he wanted to know everything about the fossils. He held Caleb's hand when they walked through the darkened prehistoric exhibit, never making him feel small. Never brushing him off when he wanted to go back and see something a second time. And at the end of the day when Caleb was falling asleep in the back seat, I turned to Ethan and whispered thank you. He shook his head, his eyes warm. You don't have to thank me, Emma. But I did, because he had done what no one else had. He had stepped into my world without expectation, without making me feel like I owed him something for it. A few weeks later, after another late-night talk over takeout, he asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. What do you want, Emma? I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned back, studying me. You spend so much time making sure Caleb is okay. Making sure you don't mess this up. Making sure you prove everyone wrong. But what about you? I stared at him, completely caught off guard. Because no one had ever asked me that. Not since Lucas died. Not since I had taken in Caleb. Not since I had become someone who had to be strong, whether I wanted to be or not. For the first time in months, I let myself really think about it. And the truth was, I didn't know. So I whispered, I haven't thought about it in a long time. Ethan's eyes softened and he reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly over mine. Then maybe it's time you start. And that was the moment I realized, Ethan wasn't just someone passing through my life, he was changing it, and maybe, just maybe, I was ready for that. I thought I had left my past behind. That Jake was a closed chapter, a lesson learned, a mistake I had outgrown. But some people don't know how to stay gone. It started with a text. Hey, can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could have ignored it. I should have ignored it. But some part of me, maybe the part that had once loved him, maybe just curiosity, wanted to know what he had to say. About what? I finally typed back. I let out a slow breath, my chest tightening with frustration. There was no us. There hadn't been for a long time. But instead of arguing, I responded with the one thing I knew would end this conversation before it could even start. There is no us. There's me and Caleb. I expected him to drop it. But he didn't. Then he showed up. I was at the park with Caleb, watching as he ran across the grass, his laughter ringing through the air, when I felt a presence behind me. I see you're doing well. The voice sent a chill down my spine. I turned slowly, my pulse quickening as I found Jake standing there, hands in his pockets, that same infuriatingly casual expression on his face. Like we were old friends, like he had any right to be here. What are you doing here, Jake? My voice was steady, but inside I was boiling. He shrugged, glancing toward Caleb. Just wanted to check in. See how things were going. I crossed my arms. They're fine. He tilted his head. Are they? I clenched my jaw. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, this isn't the life you wanted, Emma. His tone was light, but there was something smug underneath it, something that made my stomach turn. You had dreams. A career. The future. No. You're playing house with someone else's kid. Rage bubbled up inside me so fast I could barely breathe. Someone else's kid. I stepped forward, lowering my voice so Caleb wouldn't hear, that someone else's kid lost his father. And he is not a burden. Not to me. Never to me, Jake exhaled, shaking his head. I'm not saying he is. But you and I both know this isn't what you planned for your life. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, well, life doesn't give a damn about our plans. He studied me for a moment. I just don't want you to regret this. Regret what? I shot back. Choosing to love someone who needed me? Choosing to be the person you were too much of a coward to be? His jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his expression. Maybe guilt. Maybe anger. Maybe just the realization that I wasn't the woman he had walked away from anymore. I wasn't the girl who would crumble at his words, who would second-guess herself because he made her feel small. I was so much more than that now. You should go, I said quietly. He hesitated, his gaze flicking to Caleb once more. I hope you know what you're doing. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I do. I have for a long time. And then I turned away, walking toward the person who did matter. Caleb ran up to me, beaming, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed behind him. Auntie, did you see me? I ran so fast. I smiled, ruffling his hair. I saw Buddy. You were amazing. And I meant it, because Caleb wasn't the only one who had grown stronger. I had too, and nothing, not even Jake, was going to take that away from me. I didn't think much about Jake after that day in the park. I had bigger things to focus on. Caleb, work, making sure I didn't forget permission slips and grocery lists and the million tiny responsibilities that came with raising a child. But I should have known that people like Jake don't just disappear. It started with little things. Like on an old picture I had posted months ago. A text message that I ignored. A missed call that I let go to voicemail. I told myself that he would get the hint, that he would move on just like I had. But Jake was never good at being ignored. The first time I saw him again, I was walking out of Caleb's school after a parent-teacher conference. The sun had just started to set, the parking lot mostly empty, when I spotted him leaning against my car like he belonged there. My stomach clenched, but I kept my steps even, my expression calm. "What are you doing here, Jake?" He pushed off the car, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Relax, Emma. I just wanted to talk." I let out a humorless laugh. "We don't have anything to talk about." He sighed, tilting his head. "Come on. I've been thinking a lot about us. About how things ended." I scoffed. "How things ended?" Figgy laughed. "There was no discussion. No hesitation. You walked away like I was disposable." His jaw tightened. I was scared. I stared at him, my hands clenching at my sides. "We were all scared, Jake, but I didn't have the luxury of running away. I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice softer now. "I thought I knew what I wanted, but maybe I was wrong." I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I never stopped thinking about you." For a second, just a second, the old me, the one who had once loved him, wanted to believe that. That there had been nights he had missed me, that he had regretted his decision, that maybe he had changed. But then I thought about Caleb, the nights he had woken up crying, terrified that I would disappear just like his dad had. The way he always reached for me first, the way his small hands clung to my sweater when he needed comfort. The way I had picked up the pieces Jake had left behind without a second thought. And I realized something. Jake wasn't here because he loved me. He was here because he couldn't stand the idea that I was okay without him. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I don't miss you, Jake. Not anymore." His expression faltered. "Emma." "No," I interrupted. "I don't need you. I never did." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he realized that I wasn't the woman he had walked away from. I wasn't the girl who had begged him to stay, who had spent sleepless nights wondering if she wasn't enough. I had changed. I had grown. And I wasn't looking back. I turned away, walking toward my car, without another word. "Wait," he said, his voice tight. "Is there someone else?" I froze for half a second. Then turned to face him again, my expression unreadable. It wouldn't matter if there was, because the truth was, this wasn't about Ethan or anyone else. This was about me, about the woman I had become. And as I drove home that night, something inside me finally settled. For the first time since he had left, I felt free. Not just from Jake, but from the version of myself who had ever thought I needed him. And this time I wasn't leaving the door open, I was slamming it shut for good. The night after Jake confronted me outside Caleb's school, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I had been through since Lucas died. It was strange how things had changed. When Jake had left, I had been devastated. I had thought I was losing everything, that my future had been torn away from me. But sitting there in my quiet apartment, listening to Caleb's soft breathing from the next room, I realized something that shook me to my core. I hadn't lost anything when Jake walked away. I had gained something so much better. Because love isn't about perfect circumstances. It isn't about grand gestures or passionate declarations. It's about the people who stay when life gets messy. The people who choose you day after day, even when it's not easy. And Jake had never been that person. But Ethan was. Ethan, who had never once made me feel like I was too much, like Caleb was a burden, like I had somehow ruined my life by choosing to raise my nephew. Ethan, who had stepped into my life quietly, never demanding space but always making sure he was there when I needed him. The one who saw me. And I think that was the moment I realized I was in love with him. Not because he had swept me off my feet. Not because he had made some dramatic romantic gesture. But because, over time, without even trying, he had shown me exactly what love was supposed to look like. It wasn't always easy. Some nights, when Caleb was exhausted and fussy, when I was running late on a work deadline, when everything felt too much, Ethan would show up with takeout and a quiet smile, taking Caleb's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Some days, when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water, he would remind me to breathe, to take a moment for myself. And he never, ever made me feel like I was failing. One evening, As I watched him and Caleb build a Lego set together, I felt something tighten in my chest. I walked into the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as I tried to process what I was feeling. Ethan followed a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a paper towel. "You okay?" His voice was low, gentle. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "Why are you still here?" He frowned. "What?" I swallowed my throat tight. "You could have left. Anytime. I never asked you to stay." His gaze softened. "Emma." "I mean it," I cut him off. "You don't have to be here. You didn't have to step in. You don't owe me anything." He took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on mine. "I want to be here." I let out a shaky breath, my fingers curling around the edge of the counter. "Why?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "This Emma, I love you." The words hit me like a wave. I had imagined hearing those words again, had wondered what it would feel like after everything I had been through. But when Ethan said them, they didn't feel heavy. They didn't feel like a promise I had to be afraid of breaking. They felt real. And I realized, I loved him too. Not just because he had been there, not just because he had shown me kindness, but because he had never made me feel like I had to be anything other than who I was. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "I love you too." And as he pulled me into his arms, I knew, this was the love I had always deserved. The love that stayed. Life didn't change overnight. There was no magical moment where everything suddenly became easy, where the weight of responsibility lifted, where I woke up and felt like I had it all figured out. But it was good. It was real. And for the first time in a long time, it was mine. Ethan didn't just say he loved me, he proved it every single day. Not with big sweeping gestures, but with the little things. With the way he always made sure there was an extra snack in his bag for Caleb. With the way he remembered that I liked my coffee with just a splash of cream, no sugar. With the way he listened, really listened whenever I needed to talk. But more than that, he was there. He didn't waver. He didn't run. One night, a few months after we had said those 3 words, I found myself sitting on the couch watching Caleb play with his action figures on the floor. Ethan was next to me, one arm draped casually over the back of the couch, his fingers occasionally brushing against my shoulder. Caleb looked up, his bright eyes shining. "Ethan, can you help me build a spaceship?" Ethan grinned. "Of course, buddy." Caleb beamed, scooting over to make space. I watched them, something warm blooming in my chest. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just me and Caleb anymore. We were a family. Not because of blood, not because of obligation, but because we had chosen each other. One evening, after Caleb had gone to bed, I turned to Ethan, my heart pounding. "I want you to be part of this," I said softly. Officially, Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, my hands twisting in my lap. "Caleb, he already sees you as part of his life. And I do too. I want him to grow up knowing that the man who loves him chose him." Ethan's breath hitched, his brown eyes locking onto mine. I took a deep breath. "I want you to adopt him." For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face before looking back at me. "Emma, are you sure?" I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. A slow, almost disbelieving smile spread across his face. "I'd be honored." The adoption process wasn't easy. There were legal hoops to jump through, paperwork to file, home visits, meetings. But through it all, Ethan never wavered. And when the day finally came, when we stood in that courthouse, Caleb holding Ethan's hand as the judge finalized the papers, my heart felt so full I thought it might burst. As we walked out, Caleb looked up at Ethan, tilting his head. "Does this mean you're my real dad now?" Ethan crouched down, his voice gentle. "I've always been your real dad, buddy. This just makes it official." Caleb grinned, throwing his arms around Ethan's neck. And in that moment I knew, I had made the right choice. Not just for Caleb, but for me. Because love isn't about the people who leave. It's about the ones who stay. And Ethan? He had stayed from the very beginning.